Hello and welcome back, everyone. Flavour Friday. Today we are going to be going over the flavor for Portugal in the upcoming game with the codename Project Caesar. Now, we've also been playing the game, and we've done a little bit of a 50-year kind of opening steps as Portugal, so we'll do kind of a bit of a mini AAR there as well, where we will go through kind of some of the terrain features, as well as some things that we did, to kind of kick off our run, mainly focused on kind of the terrain. The run, we didn't really expand at all. It was mainly just internal stuff because I don't think Portugal's in a super good expansion spot really early, and we did have some interesting things occur as a result of the game mechanics, and so we'll be talking about that later or throughout as we talk through this. So without further ado, hello and welcome to one more Friday. We welcome the Friday, we happy the Wednesday, to Tinto Flavour, the happy days in which we take a look at the flavor content of Europa Universalis 5. Today we will be taking a look at the content for Portugal. As a Tier 2 country, it is interesting enough country in the game as it has played an important role during the period. Having over 60 DHEs, we didn't go into or kind of pop too many of these in just a 50-year span, but we did see a few, like a rebellion that had to do with our prince sticking it where he shouldn't be sticking it. And numerous content assets. Let's take a look at it. Without further ado, and of course, Pavia, he never adoos he never adoos without further adoing. Or wait. After without further adoing. That's the one. So, jumping in, the description for Portugal, also, the UI is quite nice here where you have the overview, content, and description, so you can click content and see what's going on, see it sorted by ages, this type of thing. The Kingdom of Portugal won its independence after a long, hard-fought struggle against the Muslim and Christian rulers in Iberia region. After the important social, economic, and cultural reforms promoted by King Dinis, his son and successor, King Alfonso IV, the Brave de Borgogne, may now face different challenges and opportunities while ruling over the Portuguese people. To the west and the south lies the North Atlantic Ocean, and the promise of new trade routes with foreign lands, while the east, the powerful crown of Castile with a strong dynastic connection to Portugal could lead to a united Iberia under Portuguese leadership. Whatever the future holds, Portugal will need to secure its position one way or another to ensure its future as an independent country. Now, it will be generally better, really strong at colonization. Just kind of taking a quick look at the map. I think that a feature that's pretty strong about Iberia is they can get into trading with West Africa faster than any other kind of region, other than like North Africa, of course. And so this is going to be substantive because I think you're going to be able to start pushing slaves around really, really early. And also, you're right next to another continent in North Africa / Maghreb. And there's resources there like cotton and sugar and the like. And so you could actually make use of plantations and bring up slaves from the south and actually generate quite a lot of economic activity in North Africa and be able to regionally kind of control this. These kind of border countries that border between two continents and also have powerful RGOs that are plantation potential RGOs, or they carry plantation potential. This creates like an interesting opportunity, which I think is... I think it's interesting. I think it's probably silly from a simulation perspective, but maybe it's okay. But yeah, you just own stuff in North Africa. You can't import slaves from the Mamluks or the Ottomans because those will be Christian slaves, and so they'll be released as soon as you get them from Portugal. Or actually, I don't know if the Orthodox slaves, if you could get Orthodox slaves, I don't think you can, but you can bring them up from West Africa, who again does have Muslim slavers in Mali, but they are enslaving non-Christians, so you can bring them to North Africa to operate the plantations, which operate as a powerful force multiplier for some of these RGOs. But continuing on, we have the Kingdom of Portugal here, where we are mostly Portuguese, a little bit Andalusi, which is not accepted at the game start, and Sephardi and Astro-Leonese. Overall, we actually start out in a cultural, in a deficit as it relates to cultural capacity as a result of, I think we accept the Andalusi and the Astro-Leonese, or not accept, tolerate, and just the tolerance alone, because they don't feel too good about each other is a little bit rough. The Andalusi specifically having a decent amount of cultural tradition as a consequence of Granada still being around. We see we're mostly Catholic, a little bit of Sunnism, some Judaism. I think in theory, you maybe want to conquer specifically Sunni lands and swap Muslim as Portugal. I don't know if that prevents you from forming Spain, though. You can form Spain. Let's take a closer look here. We do have the forts. For those of you who didn't know, there is fort scaling in the settings, for those of you who hate big forts. And as usual, all UI 2D and 3D are work in progress. Now let's take a look at the structural content for Portugal, starting with the estates and government. As usual, it's really nice that we don't have enormous amount of privileges kind of put out at game start. I think generally speaking, you really want to be 25 or over on the crown power, and specifically with the noble privileges, you kind of want to throttle how quickly you give these out because you want to not give out too many if you're going below 25 crown power, because this is an important break point. But by virtue of kind of how we're set up, we're really in a good place for generating a lot of control over our territory, and the positive control will give us a lot of crown power. And so, because what we'll do is we'll just propagate navally. These places max depth going from coast to inland is like 5, or it's I think there's like 6 here to get to this location. But that's inland from the capital directly, so you'll be able to get decent control there. And so we were noticing that we actually didn't struggle with crown power all that much relative to someone like Great Britain or France, where we have significant crown power woes at the game start, and the malices are really rough. We have 8% crown power, let's say. That's minus 17% tax efficiency, which is just a money destruction modifier. Stuff scales in cost based on your tax base, and so we have the cost of this full tax base, but then we don't have the return of the full tax base because of the malice. It also gives you a trade efficiency malice, and so the fact that you kind of get to throw it around with 24, 25 crown power at game start is pretty nice. You're obviously not going to be as big as England or France or something like this, but the fact that you don't have a lot of nobles who often eat into the crown power a little bit more, a lot of noble privileges is nice. You can see that they have 39% estate power. They have a lot of base power for the estates, and so when you grant them privileges, it does eat into the nobles' power. I think eventually you do this, but you do this as you start creeping up towards 30 crown power, I think. And you really don't want to have a ton of noble privileges really early on when you're sitting at like 10 crown power. But this is one of the best features of Portugal, is you're going to have a very strong government reform in Portuguese monarchy. I think there's another tax efficiency modifier you can get if you form Spain. As well. 10% tax efficiency is quite nice. It's not absolutely insane, but it is going to really smooth things out. It's a free money modifier. It's going to be good. And sailors and naval maintenance are going to be good as well. I don't know to what degree you can stack navy maintenance as well. This modifier gets better the more of it you can have. I think I don't know if you can start stacking beyond like 40 to 50% or something like this, but even with that going on, I'm more than happy to see this because we are going to be going naval like 100% with what's going on in Portugal. In fact, we're going to go naval very early because we do start out with Iberian ships. Also, the Flavour Parliament name, we have the Cal Cortes Gerais, something like this, and a couple works of art that are going on as well. Notably, we do start out with a parliament that has the burghers in, which is a substantive difference between, a lot of nations don't start with the burghers in. There's a good chunk of Europeans that do. Generally, if you're outside of Europe, you don't. And this means you could use the burgher parliament requests or agendas, which is something that's valuable because I do think that they tend to have good agendas that you want to be accepting. Otherwise, you have to get the burghers all the way up to 20% estate power before you can swap to a parliament where you can slot them in, and as you can see, we're pretty far off that. And for a lot of starts, especially starts with a lot of population, it really will take a long time because nobility and clergy, the nominal number of guys you get scales with your population of nobles and clergy, as long as you're spiritualist or aristocratic, which is basically everyone at game start. in terms of the values, and the burghers kind of scales a little bit more with the size of your economy, although they will scale with plutocracy. And so for a lot of the higher pop countries, it's going to take a while for them to get above the 20% threshold, and so this is something that's valuable, but we would be able to get out from under it pretty decently as Portugal. I think in the 50 years that we played, we were not yet above 20% though, so it would have made our parliaments worse. As promised last week, we will be taking a look at the unique naval units that are available to the Iberian countries, an important part of the Portuguese content, all unlocked by different advances. First, we have 3 different types of caravels for the first 3 ages of the game, and very importantly, you start with this at game start, and you do have a little bit of, I believe this is your ability to, is this your patrol strength? I'm not 100%. This, I think, might be your patrol strength, where you got a little bit of bonus, you have a little bit of additional cannons, but the really important thing here is that we start with this unlocked in the Age of Traditions, and so you can start propagating maritime right away. We've done it a little bit. We really kind of don't have enough sailors, though, to use, to make a big enough fleet. We are using fishing villages, though, because those have a pretty strong sailor production. Like, it's better than the wharfs, and normally we wouldn't use those because the building PM isn't that good, but we're using it just for sailors and then subsidizing that. So trying to get things going with these, because once we get the maritime going, it's going to be very, very cheap for us to get control basically all along the coast, and then just pushing it inland a little bit isn't too expensive. So this is kind of one that is critical, and it makes it so we don't necessarily have to rush barks. We see Iberian Caravel in 2. I imagine this on the tech tree. I'm actually not sure where it is. It's just after the Barks tech, and we do see it's going to be a little bit better in some other categories. This is, of course, Age of Renaissance in the Second Age, and so I assume the Bark is going to be better than this, and this is going to be better than the Bark, or, well, it's allegedly, it's saying that it's better than Bark. And then we have the square-rigged Caravel as well here, which is going to have a little bit more of this category. I do think that this is the patrol strength, but I'm not 100% sure. And so that'll be useful. To be fair, we will kind of find out when we take a look at another ship, because of the trade ships have a lot of the patrol power, and if we see a look at a galleon, which doesn't have a lot of patrol power, relatively speaking, especially because it's a much more expensive ship, we can kind of infer that's what this is going on here, is that, I think that, is this initiative? No, this is initiative. Initiative to get into battles quickly is kind of an interesting modifier. I haven't paid close enough attention on naval to really have a full appreciation for it, but if you can get into battle quicker and start damaging your opponent before they can damage you, sometimes you can rout them before anything happens. We also do see frontage, I believe, modifier. I don't know everything by their icon. No, that can't possibly be frontage. This is the frontage. So it's an interesting thing, is you can have fewer heavy ships on the front at once, and fully occupying the front is really valuable, and heavy ships are really expensive. So something we've noticed is that early on, when making fleets, we actually make a decent amount of galley plus galleon or galley plus heavy ship, even if we're wanting to use heavy ships or fight in terrain where heavy ships are good, just to make sure we hit the max frontage. And then we slowly dilute out the galleys. But you can see here cannons and hull, much stronger than this Caravel, much better ship for actually engaging in combat, especially if you're thinking of it in terms of combat strength per frontage, which I think is the proper way to think of it. There's quite a bit more than there is on the Caravel, which is, it makes sense. This is a combat ship, the other one's a trade ship. We see the Iberian Galley, again, having more cannons and hull strength, and then onward and upward to some of the unique advances of Portugal. Age of Traditions, extra infantry power, quite nice. I think that this is fairly strong. I think that I think Aragon gets this as well. I don't know about Castile. We also get the establishment of the Portuguese Navy, giving more Navy movement speed. Movement speed is always an interesting modifier, because if you're a little bit faster, this kind of allows you to dictate what happens where. We also see monthly naval tradition, and we were kind of noticing this in our Portugal game, where we are having a decent trend to Navy, and I think one of the contributing factors is the baseline Navy tradition generation, because if you have more Navy tradition, you will start ticking more towards that category, so that's useful. We have Pursuing the Waves, available in Age of Renaissance, giving exploration monthly progress plus 0.10, and this is quite strong, mainly because of its timing. So 0.1 is quite a lot of progress. I think the base value is like 0.25. Don't quote me on that. I just know that 0.1 is like reasonably high, and there's a lot of modifiers for this in the Age of Discovery. But that's the third age. This is available in the second age. So from a timing perspective, Portugal is going to be extraordinarily good at exploring in one age earlier, basically. Or half an age earlier, or 3/4 of an age earlier, considering you'll probably get Pursue the Waves a little bit later in the second age than you would get in the third age a lot of the exploration stuff, just by virtue of where institutions spawn, and Portugal kind of struggling with the initial institution situation, or that was our experience. We also have the Bombardieros, which is going to give heavy ship power and blockade efficiency in Age of Discovery, going to be pretty solid here as well. Although, man, we haven't really fought naval combats that feel super close that often. It generally feels like one side usually has way bigger fleet, whether it's the AI sometimes or us, and so often it's kind of, it feels very polarized in terms of naval combat. Like if you're a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker in terms of army, there's like leeway, there's maneuvering, this type of thing. And with the Navy specifically, it really just feels like you just doom stack it and then you slam it into theirs. And if you have the much bigger fleet, you just beat them. And if they have the much bigger fleet, they just beat you. And it just, it seems a lot less dynamic. Just in terms of how the overall combat goes. And so we haven't had really a good chance to have a feel for things, because if we're weaker or have fewer ships, it's really bad when we lose a lot of our ships, and so what we do is just kind of hide when we're weaker, and then when the AI looks weaker, we've not lost anything, so it's a little bit hard to kind of tell exactly what's going on. We're going to be taking a closer look at that in the coming weeks, though. We also have Fetorias available in the Age of Discovery, giving trade advantage and minus trade range used overseas, and unlocks the Fetoria building. Which is going to be, the trade range used overseas is going to be something we're interested in. Most of our trades will be going overseas, and the Fetoria is going to be I think this is a foreign build. You build it in or it has to be not on your continent, I think is the requirement. Which, this pairs quite nicely with expanding into North Africa, right? It's going to give you a little bit of maritime presence, a little bit of trade advantage, but the thing you're really caring about is this production efficiency. And so you're going to care quite a lot about having decent control and market access in a place that's overseas on a different continent. And so maybe long-term you move your capital to Sevilla from Lisbon, and this is something you could do, because I think Sevilla's a little bit better for pushing control to North Africa, but Lisbon's probably fine too. But I do think that you have a lot of advantages for a particular strategy, which is going after North Africa, which is something we were kind of planning on doing. We just didn't get too much of it done. I think the only conquest we got was when we joined a war alongside Castile, and we got a little bit of Morocco's holdings in Iberia. We got like half of it. Here we have monthly army tradition, which is going to be, it seems good enough. A loyalty of subjects in the Age of Absolutism. Absolutism, I think there's a malice towards loyalty of subjects for the age of 10, and then the following age it's a malice of 30, so this is going to help offset that. It is available in that age, and so loyalty of subjects is actually an interesting modifier. Most modifiers get a lot weaker as time goes on, but this is actually relatively timely, and you're not super miffed that this is available in like a later age, to the extent that you want this as a modifier, or it's something that you're kind of a fan of seeing. We do see a unique unit for the Age of Revolutions here, which is going to feature, I think that is more morale damage done, and more, is this regular damage done? Interesting. And what do we got going? It's a low initiative troop. So it's going to be a little bit more of a meat shield. The Cacadores, hunters, the Portuguese version of the German Jägers or the French Chasseurs, are an elite light infantry unit whose mission is the defense of the Portuguese territory. I do believe that this is initiative. I think this is combat speed, and this is combat power. You see that there's one frontage. Almost everything has exactly one frontage. Having more units on the front is valuable. And you can see here, as ages go by, for every age, it doubles the amount of troops that are in a regular unit. So it goes from like 100 to 200 to 400 to 800 to 1600 to 3200. All of these, when it comes together, allow for Portugal to become a dominant maritime and colonial power early in the game, colonizing North Africa. But as you might know at this point, this is not gifted. A player with Portugal has to research these advances, build these ships, and create a strong economic base that allows for the exploration expeditions to take place. If succeeding in this, the potential wealth and power that can be achieved would greatly return all these initial investments made. Now, if you form Spain, long term, the extra little bonuses you get for North Africa maybe outweigh Castile's kind of bonuses if you're going to go for like this North Africa push. I think it's actually pretty interesting, the Vittoria building, where it has to be in a different continent, and we did kind of see a little bit of interesting different continent stuff as it related to Egypt as well, because Egypt is right on the border between Asia and Africa, and so you get opportunities to build colonial buildings in areas where you have really high control, which is not necessarily a normal thing, and Portugal kind of shares that with North Africa. So very attached to that, we have narrative content available for Portugal. While the first century or so has more events based around the court, it is its development and intrigues around the Age of Discovery. The content will be much more related to exploration and the colonization of new lands, the Golden Age of Portugal. We didn't get that far because we just played a little bit of a 50-year start, and so didn't quite get to see as much of that. And maybe we'll continue the run, but I think that we're going to start a new one. Poland calls to us. We see, here, let's read through some of this. The University of Cumbria was originally founded at the University of Lisboa by Dinas, the farmer, back in 1290. It was given the name Estudo Garal, and it remained in the city until 1308, when it was moved to where it is today due to conflicts with local citizens. Since then, these conflicts had finally subsided, and the rule of Alfonso could see the university return back to the capital of Lisboa. We did move the capital back to Lisboa. We also had a little bit of an incident with some of the universities. One of the Castilian courtiers, Inés de Castro, has recently arrived at our court. She is said to be a lady in waiting and a bride to be one of the most important counselors of Portugal. That alone is not much news of interest, but what is most interesting seems to be that the crown prince seems to fancy her with a fiery passion. I think we might have gotten rid of her, or she sparked a revolution. I forget exactly how this shook out. Influence of House del Castro. Word is spread around the court that the Crown Prince Pedro the Cruel, the heir to the throne of Portugal, has become truly infatuated with character Inés de Castro, who seems to return the feelings. The two have already exchanged multiple love letters and had several meetings in secret. The negative publicity from this affair has seriously impacted the legitimacy of the de Borgona dynasty. Despite attempts to keep the two apart, these lovebirds seem to still manage to stay in regular contact. Not like this. All eyes upon Sabta. In order to establish a proper base in Maghreb, Maria de Milanés has been consulting the court as well as the war council. All ideas seem to align with conquering Sabta. To accomplish that, we could go to war with Morocco and claim the rural settlement, but there stands a risk of humiliation on the battlefield. We didn't get this event pop for us. We did end up fighting Morocco a little bit, but right now it's kind of awkward because Castile has gotten a couple of lands in North Africa, so but Castile also engaged in basically all the investment for that war, so that's kind of okay with us. We have the Portuguese ordinances. The complex web of canon, Roman, and country laws is providing a peculiar issue for the governments of the kingdom. of the kingdom set out to have a new collection of formalization of laws created by the Portuguese ordinances. It would be copied thousands of times, distributed all over the state, providing more efficient government. And we see a new government reform, minimum tax 5%. This is a fine modifier. This doesn't really do anything negative for us. And also, if you have your tax reduced to 0, or the tax rate reduced to 0, I believe this overrides it if I recall correctly. And so something that is a feature of Catholics is they don't get to tax the clergy estate. And so this would allow you to tax the clergy a little bit. And so that is quite nice. They don't get to tax the clergy, and instead everything goes to the papal states, who get just a ton of money. We get change policy cost of minus 20%. I think that generally speaking, you're not changing your laws too often via that. You're just changing them with Parliament. So this is kind of like a nothing burger. But here's another tax efficiency modifier. So we are up to 20% tax efficiency. So that's going to be quite powerful. And this is going to make you really be able to punch above your weight, economically speaking. And this isn't just like 20% more income. We have our income and we have our expenses. And let's say we're having an income of 100 ducats and expenses of 80 ducats. When we get 20% more income, or so with 100 income and 80 expenses, our net is 200 or is 20. So this is what we get to take home every month and eventually spend it on stuff. When we increase our tax efficiency by 20%, what ends up happening is now we go to 120% income. And so this means that our margin has gone from 20, because 100 minus 80 is 20, to 40. 120 minus 80 is 40. And so what this means for us is that we are going to be generating twice as much money from this 20% boost in tax efficiency. And on top of this, in the very early game, relative to some of the bigger or stronger starts, we don't have that crown power malice problem giving us, minus 15% tax efficiency. So really, a lot of other countries, like if you start out as like someone like France or England, you're going to be like, you're going to have, I think our England experience, we had like 10% crown power at start. And I think England does have a tax efficiency modifier, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's say they don't, just for the sake of like this example. If you have minus 15% in our example, then let's say England is making 200 ducats, twice as much income as us, but has the same margin between, or has the same ratio of income and expenses. So they're making 200 gold, and then they have this minus 15% tax efficiency. So this gets cut, their income gets cut down to 170 based off their tax base, and then they have expenses of 160. Now their margin's only 20, and then we're sitting pretty and our margin is 40. And so this is really like something that allows you to like punch above your weight, economically speaking. And Portugal has a decent chunk of these. We haven't gotten to this reform. And so this does make Portugal look a lot better. A lot of countries do have a lot of the flavor countries have like a 10% tax efficiency somewhere. But not a lot of them have a total of 20%. The big question is, how early on in the game are you getting this as well? Because it's going to be really valuable early on, but then as you get more of this modifier, it's going to become like progressively less valuable. But okay, continuing on, the printing press and Portuguese ordinances, I am inferring that this means that this is before the printing press, or around the time of the printing press. With the advent of the printing press, we are given a golden opportunity to streamline the distribution of the Portuguese ordinances. Additionally, the manuscript can be further consolidated, and we can act several reforms to get rid of many outdated laws that have lost their relevance in the last decade. This would be a great success of the kingdom, but it would come at a significant cost. We would lose some money, and then we would get the modifiers of the Portuguese ordinance will be modified by 50%. However, the amount of paper the pop's demand will be doubled. This is spectacular. So this, however, implies something that is just not the case also. But this is spectacular. If we get plus 50% on this, we get 25% tax efficiency, minimum tax 7.5%. That is spectacular. And 30% minus change policy cost, again, not very relevant. But this, however, I think belies maybe not fully appreciating how we feel about buy orders. peasants demanding goods is just a good thing for you. This gives you more opportunities for profit. This is phrased like it's a bad thing. Look, if you have 100 buy orders for paper and you are selling 100 paper in your market, you're going to be like, oh, I'm supplying my peasants. They're okay with this type of thing. But if you have 200 buy orders of paper, that means the price of paper is going to be sky high. So anytime you build something that produces paper, you're going to have way more profit. If we got to click a button where the option was double pop demand for paper or don't double pop demand for paper, we would probably just double pop demand for paper. Because the paper industry is reasonably good, and you also gain access to paper workshops before most other workshops. I think there's one you get access to before it, and so you're more than happy to have an economy where people are demanding a lot more paper, and you'll just be like, hey, I'll just produce more paper. Also, as an input, paper uses cloth if you have rag paper production, and if I recall correctly, there's some cotton in North Africa, and so you're going to be super overproducing that as a result of what you're doing with the colonies and this type of thing. And so that just seems like super good for you, just in a general sense, on top of getting 50% more on a really good gov reform. There is something notable here, though. This is a government reform, right? And also what we start out with, the what is it, the Crown of Portugal or the Kingdom of Portugal, it is also a government reform, and so Portuguese monarchy. So what this is going to mean is our government reform slots are going to be relatively crimped, and so we've had this strategy we've been testing out recently where we go for serfdom oriented government reforms and we grab 2, and then we get bonus and control in rural areas. Probably our government reform slots are too pressured to go for this strategy, and I don't think this strategy is even very good for the entire game. I think it's just good early on, so we would have to maybe change playstyles a little bit for Portugal around the fact that we are getting squeezed on government reforms. I think what a lot of countries are going to use their government reform slots for early is stuff that gives crown power, but we're pretty okay in that department because we should have relatively high control, and because we have both a small empire and an empire where we can push control with maritime pretty well. So this just seems super good for us here. We have a Ribeira de Naus. Despite the tradition of building ships, the Terraçanas area in Lisboa, we have lacked a proper shipyard as the settlement deserves. Thanks to the desire of this gentleman to build the Paco de Ribeira, a palace in the area where the old shipyard was, we can now erect a proper shipyard in the area. This new area has been named the Ribeira de Naus by those working in the building, and it looks like the name is sticking. The new shipyards will definitely help us build ships in an industrial way. Nice. Enlarging our navy as needed at the same time. So we will see, we get this unique building, gives a pretty nice chunk of sailors, gives extra shipbuilding capacity, and of course, a key detail here is we can build more buildings that give us more ship capacity. Man, this shirt's really tight. You can get more buildings that give more shipbuilding capacity, and those buildings, you can build them up often they're capped in terms of what level you can get, so this means you're unlocking more building capacity in Lisboa, but it's not the biggest thing. I don't think build capacity is really a tremendously strong modifier, but it is nice to be able to get a little bit more sailors. A little bit of flavor. We have Christopher Columbus. The desire for the maritime route to India has grasped Western Hemisphere. Our court is now approached by a Ligurian navigator who claims a western route to India is superior option to finding a path around the southern Africa. While some of our advisors reject the basis of the claim, this could prove a worthwhile investment. We assume that we're supposed to do this, and we will find the new world, or Christopher Columbus will sail the ocean blue, something like that. I wonder what year that happened. We have Vasco da Gama offers his service. Coming from a minor house of Portuguese nobility, he rose through the ranks of a holy order and is now offering his services to the crown to further explore towards India. Having led minor naval engagements already, he seems to be a skilled captain. So we're going to be seeing us getting more flavor as it relates to exploration. Our run didn't go this deep, and so this will be interesting to see how this shakes out. Our explorers have reached India and are now equally engaged in small-scale scale trades with the locals. Now we need to act quickly to exploit these new developments and secure trading rights in India for ourselves. The lands around Goa would serve as the perfect plan for our trade operations. So I think this just acquires Goa, and getting just a small little tidbit of just like one location can actually make a huge difference in terms of your ability to control trade in a location, because the AI I think underbuilds trade by a considerable margin, and so if you stack a bunch of marketplaces, you will be able to push trade advantage quite high, and whoever controls the trade advantage controls the outgoing trade. So often you can't import from India because they're controlling the outgoing trade, and they trade to people who are more nearby for profit, and then you're locked out of ability to import from them because you can't import anyone into a deficit, and they are importing themselves into equilibrium. So let's say they produce 20 spice, and they only have demand for 10 spice in their market. This means 10 can be imported by other countries, but since they control the trade there, they push out that 10, and then you can't import any. So what this does is you will have more trade advantage by virtue of building marketplaces there, but also if you have a location on the coast, you can patrol maritime there, and maritime also gives trade advantages, and there's texts that allow you to get more trade advantage. And furthermore, once you have a little bit of a foothold, you can fight whoever's in control of the market and use not a CB, but enforce the war goal of gaining control of that market and move that market to that one location. And so maybe you get Goa for free, you park an army there, then you use the army to fight whoever is in control of the market. You pull the market back to Goa. By virtue of holding the market capital, you are going to gain additional trade advantage and be able to build other buildings that give a lot of trade advantage. And so in doing this, between all this, you might be able to seize control just from a single location of the market, depending on how competently the AI tries to resist you, right? And so this is going to be good. We need to efficiently oversee and administer Portuguese interests and possessions in India and Africa. It has been suggested the best way to achieve this is create an institution directly under royal treasure with monopoly rights to all the related trade and construction goods. We see the Casa de India, another government reform. So we are starting to see, a third government reform. Our slots are even more pressured here, and there's at least one naval slot that we want to use, which increases development along the coast, or a government reform. I would think you would want that. And so we're going to see that this is kind of locking you in on strategies. If this is worth using, let's take a look. We get 10% trade advantage. I think that trade advantage as a modifier is just generally weak as a percentage modifier, because I think very often in the majority of markets, you're either going to unambiguously be the person who's in charge of the trade, or you're going to be too far behind for the 10% to matter in most cases. And the only time this modifier is useful is if it's making you ladder above someone else. And I think the amount of times it does that is relatively low. And so as a consequence, I think the modifier, just generally speaking, is weak. We get extra loyalty of subjects, a little bit of extra subject income, which we don't have our spreadsheet open, but the extra subject income, there's a few sources of it. As you start to stack more and more of this, you start to get some interesting stuff going on, and this is going to make colonies a little bit better, but you can go for a subject income stacking strategy where you play really tall and you don't annex your subjects. I think right now the meta is to kind of be aggressive about annexing your subjects. You really don't need a lot of control for it to be better for you to own the territory than your subjects, but if you get enough of these subject income modifiers, it starts to look better and better for you. But continuing on, we have the Governor General of Brazil. Ever since we established the capitancias in our colonies, we were troubled with their administration. The many regional governors and nobles vying for power failed to form a unified response against piracy and native raids on our colonies. Now is the time to create a new office with power over these capitancias. I don't know how to pronounce any of this. And unify our many colonies in the New World. The Governate General will act in the name of our king and establish authority in Brazil. We can establish it or not, and we will get this as our colonial policy law. Okay, interesting. So, colonial policy, I'm trying to remember if this is the one where you choose between how you're treating the natives, or if you choose whether you're going to be trade-oriented or settlement-oriented. But we see... Whoa. I just read the modifier. Plus 50% income from colonial subjects. So this starts to change things where previously, like, so I was thinking you actually can get a decent amount of control in overseas areas for, like, colonies. And if you, like, build bailiffs and stuff, you could get, like, between bailiff, 30 flat proximity, and also plus 20 for having something cored. You can get 50, and then the satisfaction's low, so maybe you get mid-40s. And at that point, at mid-40s, it's better to own it than your subject. However, if your subject gets plus 50% income, from a pure income perspective, I think the breakpoint's like 15% before you consider any other trickle-down things. And then it is going to be modified up by whatever income modifier you have. If you're only caring about gold income, which, to be fair, you care about manpower, stuff like this as well, but just caring about that, you can kick it up to now you need 30 or so control in order for it to generate more income than a subject. And if you stack a few more of these, it's not that hard. You're starting to approach it where it's going to, like, you're going to be very much just preferring to have colonies. And so this is actually very cool. Other people do not have access to this as their colonial policy law. And so you playing in and leaning into subjects is going to be better. And I think Spain probably doesn't have this either. So you would maybe want to do this before you form Spain. I'm really not sure if this will automatically deslot if you are no longer Portugal. I think it probably ought to, but it might not. Because, like, stacking modifiers and then forming, and then it seems like that's the type of thing that, from a design principles, wanted to be avoided, but we'll see. We have Fernando de Magalhaes has approached our court wishing for support on one of his most ambitious ideas, wishing to amass a number of ships for a grand voyage. He wants to completely circumnavigate the globe. What we want to do is we want to circumvent the globe, rise up into space, leave the planet. Okay. He wants to... The idea for is quite daring, so's leaving the planet, baby. But rejecting such a man might potentially lead others to poaching him. Okay? We can remove him from the court, and rejecting ambition would be a waste. And he published an epic poem that recollects fantastic voyages. Alright, fair enough. So we get a little bit of art and much more, but that's all for today. Next week, we will be 4 posts as per the new schedule. We're going to have the Tinto maps with Scandinavia. Johan finally allowed it. We were going to have Tinto talks, 2 more for the mid-game, America-related situations, Columbia Exchange. We're very excited for this. And the Colonial Revolution. We have no idea what this entails, so that's also excited. Columbia Exchange is actually, like, when playing the game, I got so excited when this event popped and I, like, realized what it was doing and what it meant, and how this, like, adds a whole nother layer of how you think about, like, economics, and I was just very excited. But we'll get into that more next week. And we also have Dev Diary number 2, Government, Politics, and Estates. And then Friday, we have a Tinto flavor about England, which we've done a run that's about 250 years in, so we can also talk about our run that we did as England, which is the run we kind of did before we started this Portugal business. Coming in, let's take a look at some of the maps and talk about what we did as Portugal here. So for starters, let's get a map that is going to be looking at the political situation. That's not the political situation. That's not the political... Well, it's close enough to the political situation here. So this is, of course, the dynasty map mode. And the first thing we did is, I think we start with like a tax base of 25, or an economic base of 25. And the first thing we did is we created our own market in Lisboa. There's a market in... right up here, and there's a market in Sevilla, and so this kind of bisects the majority of Iberia, with the eastern portion going to the Barcelona market. And so with this done, this actually just doubled our tax base right away. I think that, generally speaking, the AI undervalues this, and also I think that players are going to widely undervalue it, but having really good market access is tremendously important. And so by farming, making our own market, we do make things a little bit more of a headache in some ways, but we gain access to a lot more economic activity. One thing that was a little bit more of a headache is we made it so that it would be longer before we got institutions. I think this is mostly important in the Second Age, and we maybe could have held off, but I think getting the economic snowball going faster is going to be better. But from Lisboa, we are a little bit further from Italy, and we don't get to benefit from Castile's trades as it relates to getting a lot more trade imports coming from Italy. And I think that's something that is important, because when you get a lot of stuff coming into Italy, from Italy, you spread the institutions from Italy. And so kind of on the outskirts, we're 50 years in and we have not embraced an additional institution, but I don't think we're going to end up having to research bad things that we would not otherwise research in the free tree, and I think we're going to be okay, but a little bit slower on the institutions than we would be playing as Castile, for example, which is a little bit interesting, just by virtue of the market being a little further over and not really being able to push as much trade because we're not someone quite as large. Let's take a look at what we have in the kind of terrain situation here. So we are going to... Actually, let's take a look at this, because this is something that's pretty interesting for Portugal as well. As far as Europeans go, Portugal has really, really big provinces. You can see how many locations are here. And then when we look at the provinces section, this province, I think, has 7 locations. This one has 9. I think this one has 8. And so really right by Lisboa, and Lisboa has a decent amount as well, you're going to benefit a lot more from Dev Province than most Europeans. However, since we've made some of our videos, Dev Province has been nerfed by 80%. I do think Dev Province was out of line, super good. Now I think it's a little on the weak side, but I think it's probably usable as Portugal. I think it's usable as any naval country, though, specifically Devon Province on your capital, if your capital's on the coast. And the reason for this is your initial movement out to the ocean tile, you're going to benefit from harbor capacity, and you're going to benefit from development. Both of these are going to reduce proximity. I've left feedback on this because I think it makes some modifiers not very useful, but the main idea is, as long as you have your harbor capacity plus your dev is equal to 100, it will only cost you 1 proximity score to move out here. And so you can dramatically reduce the amount it takes to generate control here if you just dev up your capital province a little bit. So that's what we have done a little bit with our cabinet actions. But since dev province is generally weak, what we have been doing a majority of the time with our cabinet actions has been either pushing a value. We pushed naval, innovative, and centralization so far, kind of as much as we can with the tools we have available. And so the centralization is going to give us more crown power, which allows us to use more, estate privileges, without dipping under that 25, like, critical threshold. And that in turn allows us to have higher satisfaction on the estates, which allows us to tax them at a higher rate. So that's going to be good. Centralization also decreases proximity costs, which is also going to be good, which incidentally means that we don't need quite as much dev in Lisboa. We've also dev province a little bit in Lisboa, and we're approaching the threshold where we don't need to dev province there anymore in order to have maximum propagation, at which point we will probably start deving in Alto Alentejo, and because of kind of how the terrain works. So let's take a look at the terrain, and we can see here we have this massive kind of flatland position here, especially if we actually eat this out from take this away from Castile. We are going to have this big chunk where we can kind of build a really good industrial base. So I really do like Lisboa as a market capital kind of location, because all of this will be able to generate quite a bit of value. I like Sevilla as well too, because they have a really nice river. Sevilla can push control up over here, but market access can push up this way as well, and then probably another market in here if you're looking to take all of Iberia, which, I mean, why not? And so this is going to be good, but really just a lot of flatlands in this area. And so when we dev province here, we're not only generating more value from all the locations. Remember, we're deving up 9 simultaneously. We're also making it so that we can push control in deeper a bit better. And if we take this chunk out of Castile, and this is where a lot of our economic base is kind of in this P-shaped area, then I think dev province might be worth it. But dev province is probably, for a lot of Europeans, not going to be worth it when you're deving up these provinces that are maybe 4 or 5 locations, and you only have 2 areas that are like a vein through which control passes, it's just maybe not going to be like paying off. It takes like 100 years to get like 6 control out of it, which is quite a lot of investment, and so something like this. You can see here the vegetation's also not too steep as well, which is kind of what we're looking for. Flatland, little vegetation is going to be where we want to build up a lot of urban areas. Unfortunately, sparse is not that great because that's pretty bad for our pop capacity, but it is what it is. We're going to have a couple farmlands here. We have cities, or we have a city here, and we have 2 towns here, so that's going to be nice at the start for us as Portugal. But this is going to kind of be the idea. Let's take a closer look at the resources map. Now, just in general, our resources are pretty medium. Something that we have going for us is we have a ton of lumber. And so this means that we are going to not have too much difficulty keeping the price of lumber low, which is nice for being able to push our GOs. We have a couple sources of iron. We have one here, one here. There's also an iron on this coast, so one of these fishes is an iron now. So a couple things have been changed. We also have a couple fiber crops, which is nice. Don't have as much wool as we would like. I think we only have 2 sources of wool, 3 sources of wool, plus this one, which as we form the Lisboa market, actually end up being the Bourgeois market, so that's kind of annoying. Eventually it probably gets pulled back into our own market. So 4 sources of wool. We wish we had a little bit more. Textiles are a pretty big aspect of the game's economy at the current balance in terms of demand, especially if you're going aristocrat heavy. If you go burghers heavy, eventually I think furs get way more demanded, but I think it's aristocrats have, for funny business reasons, I think the aristocrats are generally going to be better, and the funny reasons are is they spend more than they take in tax, so that creates phantom buy orders effectively, or phantom money, which is kind of a curious thing. I don't think it's a big deal, and I don't think it affects gameplay patterns that crazily, other than you technically, like, aristocrats are might be better for economy than burghers, and so that's kind of a curious little one. There's a lot of interesting, like, idiosyncrasies and types of things. We talked a little bit about institutions, how we were having difficulty pulling it here. Maybe we should have taken a look at the Maghreb map too, because Maghreb actually does have quite a big thing going on as well, in that you have decent resources in Maghreb. I think this is actually worth looking at enough that we're going to take a brief moment. We are recording this in one take, so bear with me a little bit here, but we are going to look at the mega thread that is available here, and we are going to find Maghreb and just take a look at the resources, because we did kind of make a point of talking about how this would be part of the, like, greater overall strategy in terms of how we wanted to approach it, is to expand into Maghreb, and part of this was we could push resources there that are particularly good, and we're thinking specifically in resources that are available for us to use plantations on. So first things up, probably want to move the capital a little bit further south. It's in Fez. Move it a little bit further south. This allows it to push control down in the south, which normally is really bad for the control, or sorry, not control, market access. And this is a decent spot for an industrial base if we get that far into conquering. It is both flat and not particularly vegetated, although there are some farmlands up here, so that'll get a little bit more development. You can see the dev map mode. They have included this. Not the best dev at the start. Portugal's kind of got medium-ish dev, decent for Europe, I guess, or medium for Europe, extremely strong for other ones. But here's the resource map mode, and the thing we really care about is the cotton and the sugar. And you can see the sugar there, cotton, a few sources of wool, sugar, cotton, and these you will just be able to produce an absolute enormous amounts of these things. But also, with Colombian exchange, I think you will be able to plant decent resources here as well. And then use plantations on them. There's a little bit of gold in here. There's some alum, which is missing from your market over here. And there's some iron. And so this is going to be really, really nice. And as we kind of push over here, you can see there's more cotton. You'd prefer all cotton and not any wool, I think, for your overseas area. But happy to have both of them, because some places like England are just like 100% wool. So this is a little bit of a point that we wanted to make. Kind kind of as we were thinking through the resources here. We do have a source of marble and a source of sand, which is nice. This is actually 2 sources of marble, and there's a second source of sand. And so... pretty smooth, I would say. Portugal actually might be one of the most smooth countries you can play in terms of being able to keep your prices where you want, because marble is important for expanding cities, sand is important for roads. You have access to both, you have a couple sources of both, you have access to iron, you have access to wood, and so overall just a pretty solid, smooth experience. You're just not going to have any crazy good resources. Now, while we were playing, we got 2 events that allowed us to build universities. And so this is an interesting one because we got an interesting play pattern. Now, this is something that I don't think negatively affects gameplay very much, so I don't think it's something they should prioritize fixing, but it is a little bit goofy. So we have these universities constructing, right? And the ongoing construction of things requires inputs of goods. And this, the thing that we were crimped on was books. We didn't have enough books. And then, so what happens is the construction stalls out. It won't make progress. But as long as the construction is still stalled, it still creates buy orders for these things for the ongoing production. And so what this did is it created 4 buy orders of masonry, which isn't a lot as you get into the game, but in the early game it was really a long time. And so what we had to do is we needed to get books to get the construction to resume, but the bookmakers were really expensive because those take masonry as an input. And so we spent a ton of time building up masonry so that we could build the books, so we could get the universities rebuilding. And we thought that we could just like wait for the universities to finish because we just went through the Black Death. Black Death wiped out a ton of our cleerics, and we had scriptoriums to make the books to finish the universities. And so we were kind of just chilling and waiting. And then the earthquake of 1358 hits and destroys all of our scriptoriums. And so with all of our scriptoriums gone, that's when we had to build out the masonry a whole bunch. And so it ended up being like over a decade before we could finish these universities. And it like kind of stalled out our eco for like 10 years. Like in the early game when you're trying to get the ball rolling, it was like pre-ball rolling. By now we're really kind of rolling, and so something like that would not be anywhere near as disruptive. But I thought that that was like a little bit of an interesting / funny thing. It also creates, because the buy orders continue, if the construction gets stalled, it also creates interesting types of things where if you're in the north, your start is just harder because winter stalls your construction. As your construction is stalled, they still demand goods. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Remember, we were talking about paper. The demand for paper pushes up prices, which gives you more profit. So it stimulates the economy, but you don't care about stimulating the economy with the construction goods in the early game specifically. You just want to get your stuff constructed and get your prices low so you can construct again. And so if you're playing someone in the north, winter comes, freezes all of your construction. Those are still creating buy orders, so the prices of all your inputs stay high for longer. And so that is a little bit of a thing that we had to play through that I thought was interesting and worth maybe highlighting, but like ultimately in terms of something for them to address, I think that's super low on my totem pole, but it is a bit interesting. Now, in terms of we fought one war, and what happened is Castile declared on Morocco, and called us in. We'd been allied with Castile, making friends with them, because we just kind of want to eco up quietly at this opener here, especially if we're assuming that the AI is going to play like well. If we kind of want to abuse the AI, we probably could have done a weird few expansions, but we just decided to kind of be a little bit more chill about it. But we joined Castile, and then we rushed to occupy Morocco here, because we know that's what Castile wants, and we're hoping that we can get it for ourselves. What ends up happening is they occupy all of this, and then they piece out Granada. They take a chunk out of it, and then they just are fighting in North Africa. We're just chilling over here. We have this occupied, and anytime Morocco lands, we go and we bop their army. We can't really 1v1 Morocco, but we can 1v1 the amount of troops that they can land with pretty easily, because they don't have enough transport ships from their burgher levies to transport out over a decent-sized army. So they're fighting in North Africa, and we're just kind of fighting / chilling here. Also, we didn't really want to move over to North Africa, lose a bunch of troops, and then have Castile control the peace. and have them peace out in a way that we weren't really a fan of. Didn't really want to lose more pops, lost a ton to plague, and we ended up getting 2 locations out of this. I think we got the bottom 2 here. We released them as a subject with the idea of eventually integrating them later, and hopefully getting a little bit more chunks, maybe getting a piece of Granada or something like this in there as well before integrating it, and that'll be nice. And then Castile took a big chunk of North Africa here, and so that was kind of annoying, but eventually I think we fight Castile at some point later on, but right now we're just trying to eco ahead of them. But I do think that we have a really good shot for ecoing ahead of them, because remember what we were talking about, they're probably under 25 crown power. I think they have a 10% tax efficiency bonus, and so maybe they're at 105% tax efficiency, and I think their economy is like now it might only be like twice the size of ours. So let's say they're getting 200 income in ducats and they have 160 in expenses. Their margin is going to be 40. And let's say we have 100 income in ducats. Well, we have this 10% efficiency. And then there's another one from privilege. I don't know how good the AI is at slotting in their privileges and stuff like this, or even getting enough max tax to really get as much tax base. But that's not the analysis we want to do here. We just kind of want to highlight the other thing. And let's say we have another 15% from this other one, at which point, because there's this event which allows us to give plus 50% to it, at this point, we think about it, right? We are going to be getting 25% tax efficiency, and so Castile was having an income of 40 ducats with 25% tax efficiency. Our 100% tax income goes to 125%, and then our margin, instead of being 20, becomes 45. So there's a world in which we're actually making more money in terms of money that's going to our coffers, not more overall money, because Castile's still making more overall money, and this money is going to their estates, right? And the estate money is going to be fueled into buildings and this type of thing. But there's a world where we're just actually making more money than Castile right now, in terms of nominal ducats. The real problem is we don't have professional armies yet, and we also can't get anywhere near as much manpower as them, even if we can get a decent amount of taxes. So the strategy will likely have to involve, if we're going to fight Castile, and assuming they fight intelligently, which is a bit of an assumption, we're probably going to have to go mercenaries and look to build up a pretty big war chest, go for mercenaries, and then have a little bit of a go at them. And then if we do that, like in terms of plans, like what we want to take, let's kind of come over here and just like think through a little bit, looking at the terrain map mode, what's going to be good for us. Well, in terms of terrain, we would love to have a bigger chunk over here, and taking 2 provinces here and integrating them directly, this would be really, really nice. We can push a decent amount of control there, because it's inland from our capital specifically, and so it's not going to be a huge burden on us. And then we could also take Galicia and release them as a subject, and look to improve relations with them, and then reintegrate them. Don't need to use as much cabinet action if we're not incorporating directly. To be fair, we could take this and release this as a subject. That's probably fine as well. We could release Auster-Leonese, one that is of that culture, in order to improve cultural opinion. But in terms of what we're looking at here, the north has actually got some good stuff. The north is where the goodies are. Now, this map is broken because there's a silver in here, and it says gold here, but it's not actually gold. There's silver, and it's like, it looks a little bit different. So this iteration of the map is not that great, but there's a marble and 3 irons, and then like a silver in there as well. This is really, really good territory here in Galicia. And then if we look a little bit further south, what we would be getting here, not the best really, but what we could do is we could take these couple provinces and then take the 1 single silver out of Sevilla. And in doing so, we would be able to take the 2 silvers from Castile here. So this is one idea for expansion. Another idea is just going for Sevilla so that we can control the market, which I think is reasonable as well. But then maybe this is better. I kind of like this plan, or I like the plan of making this a subject and then taking the silver mine for ourselves, incorporating it and putting a bailiff there, and then releasing Galicia. In terms of if we fight Castile, after we get pro-army up and running, we would look to get some outside assistance with this. One of the problems with this entire strategy, though, is in our run, they're buddy-buddy with France, and France France is doing well against England. Let's just put it like that. And so partially because Castile is helping them, which we haven't seen the AI really do before. And so this might be a little bit more of a long-term strategy. And in the short term, expansion will look to more push into Maghreb. And by pushing into Maghreb, we can really establish a lot more power, I think, down here and get things going. We do have like a decent chunk where we could put a power base. We can move the market down south. I think it's like up in Fez right now. Move it down south, control this market, and then from here, especially if we core some of these territories down in the south, we can get a little bit more like or I don't know if it has to be cored, but from this kind of our position, we could trade gold with Mali, and then also I think if we're really proactive about being able to push trade into Mali, other countries aren't going to be able to do this, and then we are going to be able to arbitrage out. Sorry, I was looking at it like we were going to see this. We arbitrage the gold into here, import as much gold as we can into Mali, and then send it out to other nations, and really benefit a lot from arbitraging resources, just in terms of a long-term type of strategy we might have with Portugal. And so that's kind of what we have in mind for where the run might go in terms of what we're planning and this type of thing. I guess we should just kind of briefly go through the math on the plantations. But they're very strong. I hope they don't get rid of this silliness, because it creates an interesting opportunity for countries that are on the border of two continents. But in regards to how the plantations work, what it will do is it'll give +1 of that RGO. So if we build a cotton plantation here, it'll give +1. Now, this is affected by market access, so that means it gets decreased if you lack market access. That's fine enough. But it also increases cotton output by 10%. So if we have 10 cotton RGOs here, and then we have 5 plantations, the status quo is we would be producing 10 cotton. And let's say the plantations have themselves 80% market access. And so they'll only produce, there's 5 of them, but instead of producing 5 cotton, they'll produce 4. And so we have that, and so we have the 14 base cotton. But then we have the additional, and I'm not going to do the extra math because technically there's 2 multiplicative modifiers that are added for the ones that are plantations. I'm just going to apply the 50% plantation bonus to all of it, but we would have then 21 cotton. And so we go from having 10 cotton only to having 21 cotton as a result of this, which we can use to supply our Lisboa with enough cotton. Remember, we lamented not having enough wool there. We can use it to supply them with the stuff that they need in order to do the textile production. So then we can get cheaper cotton in there, and with the cheaper cotton, better margins on the textiles, look to push the price of textiles down and look to dump them to other people's markets. In theory, if we can push textiles to low enough price, we can prevent other people from having textile industries, which is kind of interesting. Because if we can push their price down low enough that their business isn't profitable at all, then they won't be able to employ up unless they subsidize. I think the AI doesn't like subsidizing buildings, and so they won't be able to fight back as much. And so maybe in terms of a 300-year plan, this is what we would expect to be trying to do with our holdings in North Africa. Now, honestly, in a 300-year plan, we probably just annex Castile and Aragon, and it's like less of a tall thing, but we could play in this tall way as well. And so that's kind of what we had in terms of our idea. Now, if you like this video, I think this is going to be where we cut it off. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do that type of thing. But also, we do have a code for EU5. I think it's actually just the entire Paradox store, which is going to be generalist in all caps. And if you order using our code, you will get not a discount, but it will send 12% of the sale our way, which we would very much appreciate. This is a great way to support the channel, especially if you're buying the game anyways. It's at no additional cost to you, just a little bit of inconvenience, because as I understand, they will email your Steam code to you on release, which means you do have to input your code rather than having it already activated on Steam, and you have to buy through this store, and it's a little bit of thing. But this is a pretty generous cut that they are giving creators. Other creators are going to have codes as well. If you prefer another creator, find their code. Ours is generalist in all caps. And also, if you just want the money to go to Paradox, of course, don't use anyone's code. But that is kind of our review of Portugal. both the flavor and our little mini AAR / kind of strategic thinking in terms of where we're going with Portugal and what you can maybe do. And we already said I hope you enjoyed and YouTube algorithm things. So with that, I leave you with a question. What was the most flavorful thing you ate this week? And also have a Flavor Friday.